Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the first training series of our how to build your movement together and creating the toolkits that you need to continue doing the work that we do. So in this particular case, we are going to be working today on just kind of laying the foundations and making sure that moving forward in the series, and as we're talking about the work that we do within San Diego 350, that we have the same understanding, since we all are coming from different backgrounds. Some of us may know about San Diego 350 and the work that we do. Some people may know what environmental justice is or what climate justice is. And some of us may not even have heard that before. So we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So before we go ahead and get started with our training today, I did want to make sure that we do a land acknowledgement. So for those of us who are here in San Diego County, we are zooming on Kumeyaay land and their traditional ways intertwined with the earth and the sky and the community, and just kind of want to make sure that we're taking time to acknowledge the folks that have been coming in here in the past, the folks that are currently here, and the future generations of the Kumeyaay people. And again, fossil free. San Diego 350 is an organization that its main mission is to make sure that we reduce the worst impacts of climate change. As most of you can hopefully agree, we're already going through climate change, and our communities of concerns are the communities that are impacted first, which is why we need to make sure that we're doing this. And you may be wondering, well, how do I continue building a movement? How do I become part of a movement? And it doesn't just have to be for climate justice. It could be for anything else that you are working. And we do have a good conversation starter that we have here for you. And I do have Peter, who has put together the next slide for you. And he has put the history of climate science behind this. This is, again, if you've already been engaged, you probably know some of this information. But if not, I want to make sure that we just kind of listen to some of these videos. And we'll go ahead and discuss into breakout rooms some of the things that we've heard and some of our first reactions with this. So if I'm going to go ahead and play this, and just let me know if you cannot hear it. And let me make sure the volume is as high as it can be.
It's 2015, and climate change is one of the biggest challenges of our time. But while it may seem like all of this fuss over global warming is a recent phenomenon, concern over the role of atmospheric carbon dioxide in our planet's climate has a long history. Let's step back in time for a minute. With the transition to new manufacturing techniques and the rapid exploitation of natural resources, the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century marked a turning point in how we as humans relate to our environment, prompting concerns about how we might be affecting our surroundings. In 1824, Joseph Fourier was the first to suggest that without our atmosphere, the Earth would be a very frigid place, and the term greenhouse effect goes all the way back to this early paper. A few decades later, John Tyndall isolated certain gases, including the potent greenhouse gases carbon dioxide and methane, that are especially good at absorbing outgoing radiation. And by the end of the century, Svante Arrhenius was calculating potential effects that human emissions could have on global temperatures. In the 1930s, E.O. Holbert found that doubling atmospheric CO2 could cause the Earth to warm by 4 degrees Celsius. And a few years after that, Guy Callender identified a rising trend in both global temperature and CO2 concentration over the previous few decades. The mid-20th century was a time of great change for government involvement in scientific research. In 1957 to 58, the International Geophysical Year brought 67 nations together to participate in collaborative projects tackling outstanding problems in the earth sciences. As part of these efforts, Charles Keeling began direct measurements of atmospheric CO2 in 1958 and soon demonstrated a steady increase each year. Public health concerns like London's Great Smog of 1952 and the hole in the ozone layer inspired investigations into the links between human activities and climate feedbacks. At the same time, geological research into deep-sea sediment cores and Antarctic ice records started to fill in the bigger picture of Earth's climate record over billions of years. In this context, the unprecedented warming trend, noticed a few decades earlier and confirmed by new studies, was pretty alarming, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, was established in 1988 to gather and interpret cutting-edge research. That was a quarter of a century ago, and since that time, the IPCC has put out 5 major reports confirming that the planet is warming, that human activities have and will continue to contribute to it, and that we're already seeing its effects in global mean temperature rise and extreme weather patterns. In 2013, atmospheric CO2 reached 400 parts per million for the first time in history. And last year, this trend continued, and 2014 has been confirmed as the hottest year on record. We are already feeling the effects of climate change, and we cannot ignore or deny the consequences of what is going on. We need to better understand how the Earth system works and responds to changes, especially the carbon cycle. And that's why NASA launched the Orbiting Carbon Observatory 2 last year. If we can track down and measure the CO2 being absorbed at carbon sinks and emitted at sources, we'll have a better global picture of where we're headed. OCO2 is part of a long tradition of engagement with the natural world, gathering information, staying curious, and preparing for the future.
Okay, so that was a lot of information, and some of you may have been able to follow that up, and some of you may have not. Does anybody want to share any initial reactions to something that they saw within the video? And feel free to unmute. No one, it was just too much information.
I'll share something.
Okay.
I'll share like my initial reaction when I first learned about all of this.
Mhm.
And my first initial reaction was that I was kind of just, besides being in shock, I was just like, why isn't this like splattered all over the news every single day? And why aren't we, paying way more attention to it? And why isn't it being treated like the important crisis that it is, And that was like, that was like 9 years ago or something, So that's my first reaction.
Yeah, as we saw in the video, in 1824 was when greenhouse gas emission was first coined. That's been a while. We've had this information for a while, but yeah, definitely agree. Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to share? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's okay. We don't have to share. The other thing I did want to say is, again, this is a very brief and fast, like densely packed, and there's probably a lot of keywords and vocabulary that you probably weren't able to follow. So we'll go ahead and continue discussing that as we go a little bit further. And we will be working a little bit more with this video in just a second. I did want to point out that this only covers the history in terms of the science. So let's go ahead and watch the next video.
It's 2015 and climate change is one
So let me go ahead and
The great question of the 70s is, shall we surrender to our surroundings?
okay, can everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this one is going to be a history of climate change, but the politics, right? So making sure that we have that information as well, because climate has become political and we just kind of want to make sure that we have an establishment of why it became that way. So let's go ahead and listen to this video now.
The great question of the 70s is, shall we surrender to our surroundings? Or shall we make our peace with nature and begin to make reparations for the damage we have done to our air, to our land, and to our...
What you just saw is a small sample from one of Richard Nixon's many speeches urging environmental action while he was president. Nixon was a Republican, but ran on a generous environmental agenda in 1968. How then do we get from this?
We can make 1972 the best year ever for environmental progress.
To this.
As we keep hearing that 2014 has been the warmest year on record, I asked the chair, you know what this is? It's a snowball. And that's just from outside here. So it's very, very cold out.
A recent New York Times article points towards Citizens United, which ended corporate campaign finance restrictions as one of the major causes of the recent polarization of climate change and environmentalism. But if we look back to the Reagan era in the 1980s, you can see this bifurcation already at work. So the overwhelming bipartisan support of environmental action in the 1970s becomes so fractured by the 1980s. Well, there are a lot of factors that influence this shift, such as backlash and the impact of conservative think tanks on political agendas. But one of the main causes was the rise of neoliberalism and a free market ideology. Ronald Reagan and fellow Republicans began championing a deregulation mindset in the hopes that the market would thrive without a clunky federal hand controlling it. However, this placed 1970s environmental laws firmly within the sights of anti-regulation crusaders. Richard Andrews, a professor emeritus of environmental policy at UNC Chapel Hill, describes Reagan's environmental approach in a radio interview for WNYC.
Rather than trying to reform or tweak the environmental regulations that had come into play in the 70s, he tried to just reverse them.
Ultimately, an environmental agenda ran counter to the core ideological tenets of the new Republican deregulation platform. In the eyes of free market Republicans, protecting America's environments meant placing unnecessary burdens on its businesses. As a result of this neoliberal Republican mindset, environmental progress suffered greatly. Reagan took many actions to distance himself from the 1970s environmental movement. He removed Jimmy Carter's solar heaters from the roof of the White House and appointed EPA Administrator Ann Gorsuch Beauford, who allowed for a steep decline in the number of cases filed against polluters. Thus, Reagan's presidential actions seem to be the Republican Party's first steps towards an agenda that ignored and at times outright shunned environmental issues. Granted, George H.W. Bush still tried to hold on to some semblance of a pro-environment stance throughout his presidency, but by the 1990s and 2000s, many Republicans began to face a realization that Richard Andrews lays out later on in his interview.
The Republican Party generally decided that no matter how much they tried to burnish their environmental credentials, there would always be some Democratic opponent who would push for more government action than they were comfortable with as a party. And so they began to dig in deeper with the anti-environment constituencies and so forth. While the Democrats in turn said, okay, this is our winning issue and the environmental groups can be our ground level support troops.
At the core of this Republican departure from environmental issues like climate change lies the party's resistance towards federal regulation and actions, especially when it comes to corporations. Andrews suggests that environmental issues are often so decisive nowadays, partly because the
environment has sort of been captured by this increasingly polarized partisan dynamic.
So a look towards the past reveals that there was a time when environmental issues like clean air and water were not tied to party lines, but instead just a simple question of human lives and existing ethically on this planet. Now problems like climate change and fracking have been molded into partisan weapons, which has created seemingly insurmountable gridlock. America's natural world then is inextricably connected to the political struggles on Capitol Hill, and not, as it should be, to questions of morality, health, and living well with our surrounding environments. So maybe finding a path forward in our environmentally ravaged world means looking back towards the common ground Americans on both sides of the table found in the 1970s and rekindling that understanding in our polarized political world. This video was made possible.
Okay. Does anybody have any initial reactions that they would like to share about this video?
Hi, yeah. Every time I hear about the political side of climate change, it makes me think about the documentary "Who Killed the Electric Car?" I don't know if you've seen it, but it's pretty obvious how kind of the car companies and the oil companies colluded to basically kill the electric car, and they were helped along by the government. So it always makes me think of that.
And it also, hi, this is JD from West Los Angeles. It makes me realize the corporate power that money has on politicians. And I agree with that young lady earlier. The media, it's not even being talked about. We focus on the wrong issues, and corporations getting away with all these federal regulations that aren't sometimes not even following, or even getting anybody to follow through. Are they following the rules? So it's just the sad situation that we're in now. And, you know, we have to make everybody a part of the knowledge and the education of what's going on so that we can be the difference.
I like the comment about the EV car documentary. I did see that documentary, and I've thought about it so much lately, because now with the rise of EV cars, I'm like, oh my gosh, like finally they're breaking through. But yeah, I totally agree with that comment.
Anyone else who would like to share their initial comments? No? Okay, no worries. We'll have a chance to discuss this a little bit more. Before we do that, I want to go ahead and just kind of pass it off to Peter, make sure that Peter introduces himself before we go to the next part.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Paloma. My name is Peter. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a fellow staff person with Paloma at San Diego 350, and I apologize for being a little late tonight. I was picking up my child at childcare and got caught in traffic, so I'm sorry, but I'm glad to see we're jumping right in. And Paloma, do you want me to kind of take over with the breakout rooms, or how would you like to proceed at this point?
Yeah, I can set up breakout rooms for you, and I'll take you to your next slide.
Awesome. So yes, while Paloma sets the breakout rooms, I was thinking like 5 to 6 people per room. And this will be a space, it'll be about, 5 to 7 minutes, a quick opportunity to talk in a smaller group about what your takeaways from the 2 videos that we just watched were. And really anything that struck you as important, a point that the videos made that you really liked and resonated with, or something that you disagreed with, or you felt was left out maybe. At the in-person training on Sunday, we had some really good discussion about what was maybe left out of those videos. And any criticisms you have of the videos, or just other questions that they brought to mind. Use the breakout room as a chance to get to know a smaller group and brainstorm a little bit about takeaways from these videos. And then I would just ask that someone, doesn't have to be super formal, but someone just make sure to jot down some notes as you discuss. And then when we come back to the full group, we'll just ask people to volunteer anything that came up in their small group, and just spend a few minutes doing that as well. So does anyone have any questions about the breakout room activity? Okay, let's do it. Let's jump right in.
All right, you should all have access to your breakout rooms. And if you need help, let me know.
In the 80s and 90s, lying to the public, right? Defrauding the public and spreading misinformation, and creating, think tanks and lobbying fronts to influence elected officials and fund elected officials. So yeah, that came up in our discussion of like, it's not so much a mystery, right? Like there are like specific bad actors who spent a lot of money causing this problem. But any other things that came up in your small group discussion?
Alexa took notes. I don't know if she wants to share.
Yeah, I could share. Yeah, I think some of the main points that we came up with were just kind of, we were all surprised to see that the awareness around this and the science dated back so far, like to the turn of the century, and then also just like politically, it was surprising that Nixon was like pro talking about this and for environmental issues at that time until it switched over. But and then also one of the other for the videos, we were agreeing that it would have been neat to see more updated information, and also just more information what was happening worldwide during that timeline. So the history of what was happening around climate worldwide, not just from the US, would be interesting to see. Yeah, that was about it. Right.
Thank you, Alexa, for that feedback as well. Yes, go ahead, JD.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about kind of the same thing regarding globally, because in other countries, and when it comes to the food part of it, they've taken out certain foods that they won't feed to in Europe, for example, which we're still eating those foods here in the United States. So we did talk a little bit about that globally, we need to see what other countries are doing that we're not.
Agree.
Any other thoughts that anyone would like to share from your small group discussions? Great, then I think we can move forward. Paloma, do you want to throw the slides back up? Okay, this is kind of quick, just kind of to just cover some key terms and basic concepts that come up a lot in this work. I'm sure a lot of stuff that everyone here is basically familiar with, but I think it can be really helpful to just kind of get it down and on the table and make it explicit. So I'll just read through them, and then if there are any questions or comments, I'll invite you all to share that. So the greenhouse gas effect, it's the warming of the planet due to the atmosphere trapping the sun's heat. 350 parts per million, which is where San Diego 350 and all the 350.org groups get their name, was deemed by scientists in the 20th century to be the safe threshold for carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. So 350 molecules of carbon dioxide per million molecules. And we actually surpassed 350 in 1988. Today we are, I think, at an annual average of 412. I think it can get as high as 420 as it fluctuates. And throughout all of human history, it never rose above 350. Neoliberalism is a concept in terms of economic ideology. It's an ideology from the late 20th century through the present. We're kind of still in it, where basically the consensus is we're going to use the government power to support corporate profits, often at the expense of the environment and human health. Organizing is just at its most basic level, working with others to define a common struggle and build the power needed to make change. And power is such a rich concept, but really it can be boiled down pretty simply to the ability to get what you want. If there's something you want and you can get it, then you have the power. If you don't have the power, you can't get it. And then climate justice is this really important concept that goes through all of San Diego 350's work. We understand that both the causes and the impacts of climate change are not equal, but they're differentiated based on race, class, gender, sexuality, ability, nationality, and more. A basic rule of thumb is the populations and people least responsible for emitting greenhouse gases are actually the very same groups who are most experiencing the devastating effects of climate change. So that's the justice component. That's what's unjust about that. And climate justice is an approach to climate change advocacy that doesn't just look at the technical problem of how do we get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and stop putting more into it, looks at it more from a social and historical and ethical framework. So like I said, I know that's kind of some basic stuff, but does anyone have any thoughts or comments or questions about that?
I will also like to share with folks, our JEDI team, our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team here in San Diego 350 has done a training on why we use climate justice and why it's very important. And we will be sharing those 2 recordings of their trainings for part 1 and part 2 of their videos, the follow-up email, because it's a very big topic to be discussing in this short of a time that we have here together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Paloma, for sharing those resources as well. Then why don't we move forward from this slide? And I'll talk about San Diego 350's theory of change. It was several years for me being involved with kind of activisty and organizing stuff before I'd ever really heard the concept of a theory of change. And I had never really thought about it, but it instantly made sense when I learned it. You know, if as an activist, if we're interested in intervening in society and changing society, we have to have a theory of how society works and how you can change it and how does it change. That the only way we can be effective in our efforts is if we actually have a theoretical foundation of what we think will work and why. So San Diego 350 as an organization really believes in grassroots mobilization. We believe that a lot more people demanding action in every forum will drive change, while the political and economic establishment has shown over the decades that they've refused to act on their own without pressure from the grassroots. We believe in local action and policy because we think that is, we think it's both achievable and effective. A group of people can really get together and make a difference at a local level, but also, you know, make a significant impact that has ripple effects that go beyond the local. So we focus on local policy and local action, but we always try to maintain a connection to a larger global movement because we think that helps motivate people and leverage people's efforts. In our small group, we were talking about the idea of a Green New Deal and how the Green New Deal was something that was very big in kind of US national level discourse around 2016, 2018. But a lot of local organizing, for example, the group at UCSD, the Green New Deal organization there, kind of came out of that national banner. So it really helped to have this kind of national banner that people were organizing behind, but then the real work of that comes from the local organizations that are forming and saying, well, what would this actually mean here in this local context? And what can we actually do locally? So yeah, that's San Diego 350's theory of change. A lot of people acting locally with a connection to a broader movement. And let's go ahead and keep moving. I wanted to, yeah, I think we have time for breakout rooms here, Paloma, because I want to be done at 6:30 with my slides. So could we maybe have one more breakout room for only 5 minutes? And this topic is very open-ended. I'm wondering if we can share with each other, what was any time that you worked with other people and achieved a goal or didn't? And it could be in an activist context or not. Just really something that comes to mind of a time you really had an experience working with others that, whether it succeeded or failed, you may have learned something from or reflected on. And so we'll just do 5 minutes in a small group. And I think we won't even really need to take the time to share back. I think it would just be good to discuss in our smaller groups. And then when we come back, I have a little quotation from a book that I'd like to read to you all. So let's go ahead and do the breakout rooms and just share with each other any experience you've had in the past of working as a group with others in any context.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hi.
I think that's
Okay. And sorry to move us quickly. I figured we'd skip the share back. I hope everyone had some good brainstorming and discussion with your small groups. I know we did. Paloma, if you want to do the slides, I just want to end my section with, I added some a selection from a book that I really like that I thought I would just read real quick. And yes. Okay, so this is one of my favorite authors when thinking about activist stuff. Her name is Rebecca Solnit. Many of you may know her. She is a prolific writer, often writes articles in the Guardian newspaper and other publications like that. She has a great book from 2004, which a second edition came out in 2016. It's called Hope in the Dark. And it's just like a love letter and an encouragement to, you know, activists on the left, and particularly environmental activists. And the whole thing is so quotable, but I've just got, I've got a couple paragraphs that I want to read real quick to y'all, and then I'll pass it over to Paloma. So Solnit says, "It's always too soon to go home. Cause and effect assumes history marches forward, but history is not an army. It is a crab scuttling sideways, a drip of soft water wearing away stone, an earthquake breaking centuries of tension. Sometimes one person inspires a movement, or her words do decades later. Sometimes a few passionate people change the world. Sometimes they start a mass movement and millions do. And sometimes those millions are stirred by the same outrage or the same ideal, and change comes upon us like a change of weather. All these transformations have in common is that they begin in the imagination, in hope. To hope is to gamble. It's to bet on the future, on your desires, on the possibility that an open heart and uncertainty is better than gloom and safety. To hope is dangerous, and yet it is the opposite of fear, for to live is to risk." And next slide. Hope locates itself, one back. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcome. You alone, or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Optimists think it will all be fine without our involvement. Pessimists take the opposite position. Both excuse themselves from acting. It is the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact, are not things we can know beforehand. We may not, in fact, know them afterward either, but they matter all the same, and history is full of people whose influence was most powerful after they were gone. And then one more slide. I say all this because hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. I say it because hope is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Because hope should shove you out the door, because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the Earth's treasures, and the bringing down of the poor and the marginal. Hope just means another world might be possible, not promised, not guaranteed. Hope calls for action. Action is impossible without hope. The future is dark, with a darkness as much of the womb as of the grave. That's Rebecca Solnit, and I will pass it back to Paloma.
Thank you, Peter, for that. And let me just make sure. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So moving forward, I did kind of want to take some time and discuss what some of the information that we're doing here, and we've been talking a little bit about, is the movement and how do we build the movement. And I think there's a lot of key roles that go into this, but I just kind of wanted to share some of my top 4 here for you. And every movement, it could be something really, really big, like the civil rights movement, environmental justice. It could be something really, really small, but it always starts with a leader, somebody who is willing to stand out, sometimes be called crazy because people are not used to that particular opinion or thing that they're trying to do. For example, where we were saying, you know, somebody coming in and talking about climate change, and people are saying like, oh no, that is crazy. Or for example, one of the things that I first, when I had a conversation and was just getting into learning more about climate justice, somebody was telling me that they only bike everywhere. And for me, that was very, very crazy because I was always just using public transportation. And then everything that I knew was driving your car somewhere, right? And being on a bike and going everywhere on a bike seemed really, really crazy to me. And that is just kind of like one of those quick examples, but I just kind of wanted to start with every movement starts with the leader, right? Somebody who is willing to stand out, somebody who is willing sometimes to be ridiculed, and some of the times it's somebody who is alone. But it's somebody who has a cause that's easy to follow, right? And this is why I'm calling this person the nurturer. Because as we talked in our theory of change, we as 350, we're part of 350.org, right? Which is a national movement that was founded here by Bill McKibben, who you'll see on this image, with a group of his college university friends in 2008. And in 2009, they hosted their first International Day of Climate Action, which then here in San Diego at San Diego 350 in 2011, we joined in on their Moving Planet with Masada and a group of her colleagues that she had met, and a group of friends. Some of those include like Phil, Petrie, and we got together and mobilized 400 people to put a faith panel together, which was the local action, getting a group of leaders and a group of organizers and other organizations that were together, and connecting it to that march and rally that was going on national-wide organization. And this in 2011 was the very first thing that we did as San Diego 350. And that was because we had a group of leaders that stood out and brought this thing together, making sure that even though maybe it was the first time that something like that was going on and we were doing a Moving Planet rally, they were able to nurture and show others what this information is and why it's important and why we should be going behind this and moving forward. And I am seeing some things in the chat, so let me just make sure I'm not missing anything here. Oh, okay, that was about the quote. Great. So first one, the leader, how I know it and how I see it is the nurturer. Moving forward, we also have somebody who I think is very important as well, is the first follower. So why is the first follower very important? Because the first follower takes that first person, our nurturer, our leader, from becoming somebody who's just kind of walking down the street, doing an action, to now it's a pair, right? Now it's somebody who has decided to stop and listen to what this person is trying to say, and joined in, right? So this person is what I say is the teacher, because this person is now showing the other people around how easy it is, or if it's not easy, how they can follow as well, right? So this first follower is making sure that they're showing other folks how we get involved, and that it's okay for you to stop and listen to what is going on, to stand up. It is okay to take action. It is okay to join in. And here are the images that I have for you. In 2011, after we had our first rally, we started to gain a little bit of momentum. And this was some of the teams. For example, our Interfaith Coalition of Earth Justice was one of those first teams that was born. And one of our first teachers that were showing others how we can create more teams to keep doing the work that we've now been able to successfully have wins with a couple of different teams. And that's going to be this image here, our Interfaith Coalition. And on this image we're going to be seeing that in 2015, some of our first teachers and what they decided to do within their teams was make sure that we were going through and just kind of giving people that information, the knowledge that they needed, in a way that was easy to digest this information so that people could know how to follow. So what this particular group did, and we have Michael and Linda here on this particular image with a mic from Kojaks, they went and drew with chalk on the line, the water line of where the sea level would rise in 2050. And it was really simple for folks who were, it was their businesses to be like, hey, here, take a chalk line. And this is where the sea level would be rising in 2050 if we don't do anything about it now, right? And that's something simple and easy. They didn't have to know this information before. They didn't have to be climate activists. It was as simple as get a piece of chalk. Here is an image or the information that you need for you to draw down. And now there's folks coming out, there's folks interacting, and it opens up that step to see how you can start getting involved and taking action. Any questions on these first two and why they're important to building a movement? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move forward then. After we have our first leaders, we have our first followers, we start to get a crowd, right? And 3 people or more is considered a crowd. And why is a crowd necessary in this case? I was calling it, we're starting to get that movement, is because we are starting to get more people to join in. We're starting to build a little bit of that momentum. Now you are no longer just pair of folks that are trying to talk to people, but now we are becoming a crowd. And a crowd is news, right? We're now able to get more people's attention. Now we're public, and it's presenting possibilities, things that we're able to do. So as more people start joining, we're starting to show that it's a little less risky for those that are on the outskirts to start joining, right? And in this particular example, I have an image of 2015 where we did our climate justice, one of our climate justice rallies, and we had started building up our base even more, where now we're able to help use those bodies and create images like this, where we're making words on versus the aerial view. We did things like on this image here, where now we're able to travel and support other places. This is an image from 2016, where we traveled at San Diego 350 and all of our base to support LA when they were going through the hashtag Break Free LA, and join in with other 350.org organizations in California. We were able to join in with their local grassroots organizations and show support that way. And for me particularly, I think this is where I like to start showing and kind of think about. I personally love to social dance. If you didn't know that about me, now you do. I love social dancing, and anytime I go somewhere and it's like some eating portion, I'm always waiting for the music to start because I am ready to get on the dance floor and just have fun. But most people are very nervous. They're like, oh, like myself, I kind of be like, okay, I'm waiting for that first person to go on the dance floor so that I can start dancing, but I don't want to be the first person. And so that first person who is, likes maybe public speaking in this case, or is okay and comfortable with being there even though nobody is dancing yet, they go. Then they have somebody else that now they can start doing dips and turns. And once we get a little bit more folks, now we're getting that crowd, and it's a little bit less intimidating for folks who aren't necessarily loving social dancing, but they're more willing to join and start now. And let me go ahead and move on, which brings us then to the majority, right? So now we are the majority. There's more folks on the dance floor. It's okay to go in. You can blend in if you're a little bit scared of standing out, but you know that you are doing something that you care about, that you enjoy. In this particular case, it would be in 2017 here is one of our marches that we did. And a couple of different organizations came together to have marches starting at different sections. For example, if we were doing the climate justice, we started in one location. If we were doing in this particular case, we collaborated with the Women's March. They started in their particular location, and as all of the organizations were coming together, they all met up in a specific location to now show that we are the majority. And even though our causes are a little bit different, we're all still fighting for the same thing, because you can't really talk about climate justice without acknowledging all of the other social aspects that go onto this. Yes, does somebody have a question? Sorry, I heard something. Okay, I'm gonna say that was just that. And then on this image here, we have an example just really quickly of 2022 when we had our most recent rally, which was the Biden declared climate emergency. And one of the big things of when you're starting to become the majority is that now you have that power that we were looking for, right? Now you're able to use that leverage of we are the majority. So you can use that power to say like, hey, we've been able to get all these council members to sign on to this particular petition or to stop doing this. Sorry, my cat just passed by. To stop doing, supporting this particular bill. Why have you not signed on yet, right? Why have you not gotten with what everyone is telling you, like, hey, President Biden, we are in a climate emergency. Please declare it. We are the majority. We have all these people. We know that this is what needs to be happening. Okay. And I'll stop at that. Anybody have any questions? And again, this is all very basic, and it doesn't have to be at that big scale that we were talking about. I, in terms, was using a little bit of the history of what San Diego 350 has been doing as they've been building the work that they're doing. You can definitely apply this to something shorter, but just wanted to see if anybody has any questions or anything that they want to add.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, sorry, Siri heard me.
It's okay, Paloma.
That's funny. Siri's listening to us. I just want to say that I've been involved with 350 since 2014. And one of the things that I think has been, and I talked about it in our group a little bit, was one of the things I think has been a big victory is community choice aggregate. As far as that's really caught fire in all of San Diego County. And actually having the city of San Diego converting, I think it was just last year, to community choice aggregate was a big part of 350.org's efforts and work in this area. And the one thing that I've really appreciated is that it's not just 350, it's like 20 other organizations with 350, you know, making that happen. And now what we have to do is make sure that the promises of community choice aggregate is actually we can actually see that in San Diego. But I know Oceanside has joined one. I know that up in my area, Carlsbad and all that, we have our JPA. So it's really caught fire. And I think a lot of it has because of the work of 350 and the environmental organizations.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I'm seeing in the chat there's no questions, and it seems like nobody else has anything that they'd like to share. We could move forward, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. Which then brings me to some of these things which I wanted to just kind of point out. And I know in some of my groups that I was talking with, we talked about starting a couple of things, but then having to move or not being able to continue working on that, and things just kind of died out because there was nobody left to kind of continue that. And I think that happens a lot. And so I did want to highlight some of these things, and it's making sure that when you are building that movement, we need all types of folks to help fill in. So it's great to have all of the folks who are like the sciencey folks and want to talk about the science part of like CO2 and all of these things. It's great to have folks who are very much into the like politics and want to like move forward with campaigning and doing all of these things, but we need to have infrastructure, and we need to make sure that, because for our example, since we are a multi-generational space and we're volunteer led, it is we're always getting a lot of new folks. There's always a lot of new excitement, and because of all the folks that we engage, we're able to do all of these amazing, great things, having like 12 to 15 different volunteer teams at a time, tackling this particular issue in different forms. It does get tiring sometimes. Folks, move places, and you're not able to build a movement where it takes a lot of time to kind of get some of these results that we were sharing here earlier. So it is key to make sure that you're kind of developing infrastructure as you're going on with some of these things of like, yes, I'm taking the time to teach folks. Yes, I'm taking the time to kind of connect to larger things that are going on. I'm doing local action. I'm collaborating with community members and other organizations that are experts on what they do. And we're like being as as well-rounded as possible and giving as much voice and space for folks to continue doing the work that we do. So I just kind of wanted to share this particular spot here for you. If you take a look at this, like I shared in 2011, we were able to kind of get 400 people together. And that kind of helped propel us into the first couple of teams forming, which then helped us become a 501c3 in 2014. And for you, that could look like maybe getting a space together where you can come in and have meetings, or if you're working in gardens, getting a local central space in a garden where now this is the location where we're going to continue building this particular work. Or again, that could look different for everyone depending on what it is that you're working within. In 2016, we were then able to hire our first staff member who helped us, coordinate. I think the biggest thing, because we were volunteer-led, a volunteer coordinator that was able to help bring in new folks, get them up to speed, and give them the resources that they needed to then continue doing the work that was already being done or start new work. We were able to hire our first executive director in 2018, and then being able to transition fully online when the pandemic hit. So these are all very key in the background, making sure that as things are progressing and you're getting all these wins, or you're learning from, I don't want to say failures, because as Peter said earlier, it's just a new way to find a different way to tackle that particular thing and learning from it, how we can adapt. But yeah, just wanted to leave it at that for you, because thinking about infrastructure when you are building a movement is very key. And this is the last thing that I will leave us before we go into another quick little breakout room, which is in 2022, we're in 2023, sorry. In 2022, just as the organization, we were with everything in mind, building the power, having leaders, being able to teach and everything, we were able to lead strategic campaigns, advocating for county action, making sure that we were fighting Semper's fossil fuel agenda, having national and state policy wins that we were engaged with, making sure that we're standing up for climate justice and equity, making sure that we're standing and supporting the organizations that we work with, making sure that we're building capacity, making sure that we are mobilizing folks and giving them the training, the education, and leadership that they need. Sorry, not leadership, and the skills that they need so that they can find their own voice within the organization. And one of, I think, the biggest things is listening to our youth and empowering our youth to see the type of world that they want to be in. So any questions on this part before we go to the more talking part? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. All right, so let me stop sharing screen so I can go ahead and put us all into breakout rooms. So I know we do have a variety of folks here. Some of us have already been engaged with climate work, and some of us, this is maybe the first time that we're listening to that. Can I just get a show of hands so I can gauge where we're at? How many of us could understand, or when we were going through the vocabulary words or talking about some of this information, it was pretty simple. We felt like we had a basic understanding about what any of that meant. Raise your hand. Okay. And how many of us, some of this information was new and it was maybe a little bit hard to follow things that we've been talking about so far? Okay, I'm not seeing hands on this slide. Okay, great. So it looks like it was probably a refresher then for most of us, which is good, which means that when we start going into the in-depth trainings later on in the series, it is going to be so much more easier to have those conversations with each other. Okay, so with that being said, then I'll go ahead and skip the breakout room since we don't have a lot of newer folks on here. So let me just go ahead and share my screen then again. since we're gonna skip that. All right, okay. Well, with that then, it brings us to a little bit closer to the end of our presentation, since we skipped that last breakout room. I did want to share with everyone to please, if you haven't done so already, we're always happy to talk with you and get you started with connecting either with any of our staff or just kind of getting you started with our teams and showing you how you can take action. And if you feel like there's something that we should be doing and you're excited to get that started, we're more than happy to support you and help you get that up and running. I will encourage you to please go ahead and scan the QR code that's on the image on your phone and fill out a volunteer interest form if you haven't done so already. And if it's been a while since you filled out your volunteer interest form, go ahead and update that. There's always things that are changing in the organization and there's a lot that you can do. But most importantly, I think the most important thing that you can do is spread the word about the work that we are doing, about what you learned today, and having those conversations within your networks, right? Have you had conversations with your spouse, with your family about climate change and what that means to you? Have you started asking those around you in your work, what they are doing or how you are taking action within the work that we're doing or anything that you may be passionate about? So I will ask you to please help us spread the word. We continue building the movement, we continue doing the work that we do from folks just learning more and being able to take that next step. And lastly, I just want to say that this first training was definitely meant as just a quick refresher and making sure that we're on the baseline of some of the key things that we're going to be talking about moving forward, like climate justice. What does that mean? What does CO2 mean? But most importantly, just making sure that we have a baseline and the same information because we don't want to assume what you already know. And I will invite you to please go ahead, if you haven't done so, sign up for the upcoming trainings. These are going to be very specific trainings that we're going to be having. So the next one is going to be March 19th and March 21st, one in person and one online, on how do you organize and build relationships with folks. So we talked about building this movement and going forward, but how do we actually get people to stay? How do we get them engaged? How do we continue having folks that have been with us since 2011, since 2014, and still doing the work that we're doing, right? How do we build a strong relationship, a strong support to keep going? How do we advocate, which is a next training that we'll be having April 16th and April 18th. How do you advocate? How do you learn from the campaigns? What are the wins? What are the successes? How do you strategize and decide on what campaign you're going to be following? And then lastly, how to talk and write effectively. It is very true now that we are going through online and at the whole way that we operate has shifted worldwide. How do we talk and write effectively, right? How do we use social media? How do we make sure that we're getting across why people should be joining us, right? Or why people should be interested about the cause that you're passionate about? How do we make sure that we're communicating effectively with folks that we're trying to reach out to? And that's going to be in May 14th and May 16th. So for all of the trainings, you have a chance to be in person or online, just depending on what is best for you. So I will encourage you to please go ahead and sign up for those trainings. And our staff who specialize in these particular categories will be working with you. And that is it. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to share?
Not at this time.
I did have one.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay.
Yep.
Just a quick one. Do you know where the physical meetings are taking place?
Yes. So the meetings are taking place currently at our San Diego 350 office. It's in Hillcrest.
Oh, okay. Hillcrest.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
I did want to know too, is 350 starting to get involved in the effort around animal agriculture as well? How the animal agriculture impacts the climate?
Not particularly in animal agriculture. We do have our food and soil team who do work on regenerative agriculture and some of making sure that we're working with carbon farming practices, but not that I'm aware of with animal agriculture, but I think we do have one of our food and soil folks here. Yes, Alexa, I don't know if you'd like to share a little bit more on that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think kind of like what Paloma was saying there's the plant-based working group in the food and soil team, which works to essentially educate other folks on the benefits for climate on plant-based eating, but also to on more of like an institutional level to try to get universities and like other institutions to adopt plant-based eating into their menu planning and things. And so that's probably the closest. It's but we promote it more for the climate, it's not like an animal rights. There's not really an animal rights.
Oh, no, that's what I meant for the climate.
Oh, for the climate. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
be probably the closest. Yeah, that would be the group, the plant-based group in the food and soil team.
Is that on the website or is that something we could get more information on?
Yeah. If on the teams, when you go to the main page and you click teams, there's under the public policy teams, you'll see the food and soil page. But I can put my email in the chat actually, and I can connect you. Here, let me put my email in the chat and then I can connect you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Kathy, for that question. Tanisha?
Hi, I just wanted to say appreciate just the space. I'm kind of going through these and I look forward to the next workshops going forward. And I'm actually pretty involved with San Diego 350, the climate leadership. And we are actually having a session on the 2nd of March 2nd at 6 p.m. where I'll be kind of the featured speaker along with Sister Maria Muhammad with I Am Green, and just talking about what we're doing in the Southeast San Diego community for climate justice, and just definitely want to invite everyone out. I put the registration link in the chat, so definitely look forward to anyone that can come. And obviously, especially since we're all in this kind of space together, I definitely look forward to hearing your thoughts and hopefully connecting further. Thank you.
Tanisha.
Yes, thank you for that. Anybody else, any comments, questions that they'd like to share? How will be notified about? Yeah, Nima, great question. So if you go to our website or scan that email, you can always sign up for our newsletters. We have a monthly newsletter for just more general, bigger topics, but we have a weekly volunteer newsletter that tells you what actions you can take for those coming weeks for that. Whether it's like a quick, hey, we need you to send a comment about this particular thing. The city cap is here. This is what it's missing. To, hey, there's an event going on. We need folks who can help with setup and tabling or getting petition signatures, to a lot of different things. So the weekly volunteer newsletter will be the best option for upcoming opportunities. And we're always also, like I said, fill out the volunteer interest form, and we're always reaching out to folks who have stated specific volunteer interest that they have. Anyone else? Comments, questions, concerns?
No, but I enjoyed your PowerPoint and it was very informational, and it just gives me a lot to kind of think and organize as to how I'm affecting the climate, and what part I'm doing. So I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next few meetings. So thank you.
Yes. And I will re-emphasize for everyone, you do not have to be a climate expert to join and get started. That's why we're here to help you. Just kind of like, personally, I love dancing, and I will find a way to make sure that if you're dancing and that's the thing that you love and that's how you want to contribute, we can find a way. We'll put a fundraiser together where you could host a dance class and help that way. So really, whatever your background is, there's always some way that you can get started and join. And we're always more than happy to also teach you things that you don't know, right? You want to get into legislation, but you have no idea how to talk to a senator, or you want to give a comment, but are like nervous public speaking, we're more than happy to like teach you and give you like investing in you so that you can learn those skills and hopefully pass them forward one day to other folks who are also hoping to learn.
Oh, one last question. Is the PowerPoint going to be made available or just a recording?
The recording will be made available. Are PowerPoints helpful for everyone?
They'd be helpful for me. I know that.
Okay, yeah, we can make the PowerPoints available as well. Yes, Nima. Yeah, we don't necessarily record volunteering hours, but we do, if you request us, if you need it for a particular reason. I know a lot of our youth who work with us need volunteer hours for their classes and school and things, so we're more than happy to do that. Or if you need it for whatever other reason that you may need it for, we're more than happy to help you with that.
I have a question. I assume we are all residents of San Diego County, right? We might be needing some volunteers where we're planning to do some action in Escondido. How can we reach out to each other?
Great question. So for particular actions, I think specifically in North County, we don't have a team yet that's a North County team. We have like South Bay teams. We have teams that work centralized. So if you'd like to have a North County team and are excited to kind of put that together, we're more than happy to help you and get you started with how do we connect with folks. In any other case, you're more than welcome to email volunteer@sandiego350 and just kind of share that information. And that'll go to our marketing team just to kind of like see what the best way to get the word out. So if it's like a flyer, letting folks know that that's happening, or if it needs more than that.
Thanks.
I would volunteer to help with North County also.
Who was that?
Kathy Rawlings.
Okay, good.
Great, Kathy and Anne Marie, if you want to give each other your contact information.
Well, we need to talk.
Okay, anybody else, any other questions, comments, concerns, anything that you've heard throughout your time here in the videos that you still have questions about? Like I said, this is really the space where we're trying to make sure that we're all in the same baseline and not just assuming that folks know certain things, because this will be very helpful once we're talking more in depth on the logistics of building a campaign, organizing, building relationships, etc.
So could I reach out to you in order to maybe get all the people that are on this call from North County? Would that be a good way to start?
Yeah, so for all of our staff members, it's just their name at sandiego350.org. So I can put mine in the chat. And Peter, if you'd like to add.
Right. Well, I have yours from the registration, right? So if I were to email you and said, hey, I want to get everyone that's on the call from North County, where we could maybe start our team. Would that be the way to do it?
Yes, I'd have to double check about some logistics for that, but
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
feel free to
Okay. Great, I will do that then. That'll
Or
probably
you
be
could
the easiest
just
way to
put
do it.
your information on the chat, Kathy, and then they could reach out to us. I'll put my email on there. So if anybody wants to reach out, my email will be in the chat room.
What, you're also from North County?
Well,
So-
I'm from LA, but I visit.
I recruited her to
Carlsbad.
join us.
So yeah, it's not that far, but
kind of.
yeah.
The beauty of Zoom, being able to come into specific trainings from other places. Okay, anybody else? Comments, questions, anything that we felt lost when we were discussing anything throughout the training?
No, you did a great job. Really appreciate it. But don't go yet because I'm putting my email in there.
Yeah, I was gonna, Kathy, are you willing to put your contact information in there? Because I'm Escondido also, so yeah, I would love to.
Who said that?
Yeah, I just did that.
It's me,
It's
Gina.
krawlings.ssca.
Okay, everyone else who is not in North County, thank you so much for joining us. We did end a little bit earlier, so I could feel free to please RSVP for the following trainings. They are going to go more in depth about some of those topics that we discussed. And yeah, if you are in North County and want to share information, feel free to stay on. If not, have a good night. Make sure you eat, drink, and just
dance. And dance.
Yes, go dancing.
Thank you. Thank you. Good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I kept putting a little dance girl for you, Paloma. Look, the little dance girl on top.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Zoom has been upping their game.